I am Michelle Mazelleغ. Welcome back to my channel. It is another Let's Chat Saturday, so let's get into it. All right, so the comments that I'm going to be discussing today were taken from the video that I just posted on this past Tuesday about the Ghanaian woman telling African diasporans to leave Africans alone. Reading through the comments, I think sometimes people just want to write something just to write something, or to say something just to say something. And a lot of times the responses, of course, as you know, sometimes doesn't make any sense. The comments don't make any sense. And it's just like, if you have to do that in order to be heard or in order for you to be seen, then you definitely need to be looking at your own life and looking at who you are as a person, to think to just randomly comment stuff on a video, just be commenting. And so I saw a lot of that on this video, just a whole lot of just crazy comments. And I'm just like, you wasted a lot of time writing a comment that you didn't even need to write, like for a video that you didn't have to watch. Okay, I just have to say that, because I just think it is so hilarious just that people take the time out of whatever they're doing to write the most bizarre comments on a video that nobody told them that they had to watch. But anyway, the first comment that I'm going to share, of course, was in disagreement with what I was saying. And so this is what the comment said. I think what African Americans recognize is that diaspora conflicts tend to arise from continental Africans. African Americans are acutely aware of the history of the diaspora conflicts that have played out in the West. Historically, African Americans have tried to mitigate the damages those divisions have caused as its source as civil activists. I don't think it is because there is a desire to reconnect the continent as much as there is a desire to heal that divisiveness that plays a huge, massive role in the disconnect among diasporic peoples in the West. Not knowing and caring about our history is a major source of contention between Africans and those of the diaspora. It should not be left up to the African diasporic people to reconnect with continental Africans to heal that rift or inform them. It is up to continental Africans to bridge the gap that they most often antagonize among diasporic people in the West. So this is what I heard from that. Blame everything and every problem, every miscommunication, every divisiveness. We can blame it on the people on the African continent. That's what I got from that. It's nobody else's fault for the reason why that things are going on. It's nobody else's fault but the people on the African continent. I find that interesting. I find it troubling and disheartening that even Black people, even the African diasporans, even some African diasporans think so negatively about the continent of Africa. It's really sad that some African Americans can't even take some responsibility. They want to blame everything that happens on the people of Africa. They're not doing anything. African Americans aren't doing anything. They are not causing any division. They're not the ones that's, separating the people further. They're not doing any of that. African Americans and the African diasporans are the ones having the conversations. They're the ones putting their best foot forward. They're the ones trying to reconnect. And the people on the African continent are doing the total opposite. Nobody on the African continent is trying to reach out. Nobody is trying to build a bridge. Nobody is trying to do any of that. And that's what some African Americans and some African diasporans think of the continent of Africa. Anything negative that they want to think about the continent, they will, so that they don't have to take responsibility and so that they can continue to look negatively on the continent. If you blame everything on them, then you don't have to then worry about making any changes. because you will continue to say it is because of them that no change is being made. It is because of them that no conversation is happening. It is because of them that we can't bridge the gap. It is because of them. So that takes the responsibility off on African Americans and African diasporans. Then they don't have to worry about that. Then the division continues. The division continues. Let this person say it. The African Americans have just done so much. The African diasporans in the West have just done so much to bridge the gap between these two people. They have educated the next generation. They have tried to have conversations. They have tried to build a relationship. They have tried to do all of that. And the people in the African countries just turned their back and said they don't want to have anything to do with any African diaspora in the West. That's kind of what this is saying. Now, the one sentence that I thought was, that I'm going to read again was this one. It says, I don't think it is because there is a desire to reconnect the continent. So she doesn't feel like that African Americans or African diasporans in the West want to connect to the continent. But when you talk to African Americans or some African diasporans who have already said, I have a connection or I have some African lineage, they have a desire to connect to the African continent. They have a desire, which is the reason why some of them are going back there. While some of them are visiting there because they have a connection there. They want to have a connection. They want to reconnect. So that's untrue. You might not want a connection to the African continent. But when you talk to African Americans who acknowledge the African lineage, most of them say they want to have a connection to the African continent, which is the reason why some of them go get a DNA test, a DNA ancestry test, to figure out what part of the West African countries are they from. If they weren't interested in reconnecting with the continent of Africa, they wouldn't go through the extent of trying to visit there, of trying to live there, of trying to move there, of trying to find out which West African country they're from. So you don't have a desire to connect to the African continent. But let's not put the African diasporans in the West in that, because the African diasporans in the West who say that they have an African lineage, their desire is to connect to that continent. Then she goes on to say, as much as there is a desire to heal the divisiveness that plays a massive role in the disconnect among diasporic peoples in the West. When you connect to the African continent, the division will mend as well. Those go hand in hand. You connect, you mend the division. Because when you connect back to that continent, you connect back to the people, you connect back to the history, you connect back to the people, to the country, to the continent. When you connect all of that together, there would no longer be a division anymore. It will be closed. The gap, the bridge will be closed. There's no way for you to mend a division without making a connection to somebody. I got to connect with somebody in order for us to even try to mend whatever fences that we got going on. We got to have some type of connection to even want to build that type of relationship. Now, the last thing on the comment to talk about was her talking about it should not be left up to the African diasporans to mend any kind of conflict. It should be left up to the people of the African continent. Why? Why can't the conversation start with African Americans? Why can't African Americans be the one to open the door? Is there some guy that I don't know about that says that we have to wait on the people of the African continent to have conversations, to make connections, to learn more about the history, to learn more about the culture? Where is it in the guide that says that African Americans have to wait on the people on the African continent? We don't have to do that as African Americans. African Americans can open that door. They don't want to. Some of them don't want to. They want to keep placing the blame on the people of the African continent so they can continue to say, well, it's their fault, the reason why, we have this division, because they don't want to talk to us. Even though nowhere in there do you see an African American opening up the door. If the civil rights activists sat down and waited for the other people to sit and decide when segregation was going to end, when the Jim Crow laws were going to end, if they sat there and waited for those types of conversations, integration never would have taken place. The things in the South wouldn't have ever somewhat improved. If they sat back and waited for people to have those conversations, they went up and they done things on their own. They opened that door. They wanted the change. They wanted something to take place. When you want something to take place, when you want change to happen, when you want connection to happen, you are the one that initiate that, because that's what you want. But when you don't want it, you don't have a desire for it, then yes, you'll sit back and be like, well, yeah, they didn't come talk to me, so I guess they just don't want to. So African Americans can be the first one to take the step if they want to. There's nothing stopping African Americans to take the step to speak to the people on the African continent, to make that connection. There's nothing stopping African Americans but them. Nothing stopping African Americans but them. The next comment says, quite refreshing to hear a sober perspective. I hear a lot of Africans hate us from African Americans, which I always find hilarious. We don't hate you. Rather, your attitude when you enter a new room and you feel your own talk and tell everyone what to do is what we don't like. Instead of listening and learning, a handful of African Americans want to be talking and in the end learn nothing and just come out ignorant. I love that you pointed this out. Some African Americans still have the colonizer mindset that they don't want to act like they don't have. We can't, African Americans can't sit and act like that does not exist in some of their minds. And so, yes, some of them do think that they know more. And a lot of times it is just because sometimes when you learn new things, then that means you have to change your mindset then. You got to change your mindset when you learn new things. So it's best to not learn it, because then you don't have to change. You don't have to change who you are or your way of thinking if you don't learn something new. So, there are some African Americans who would rather not learn things. They would rather just come in and say, I already know it. Because if they already know it, then that means that you can't teach them something. And there's some African Americans that don't want to be taught anything, because that might make them change their perspectives about the people on the African continent. And there's some African Americans who are just stuck in believing what they have been taught, believing of what they think it is. And so if it doesn't fit the narrative, they don't want to hear nothing about it. Now, I said some African Americans, because there are other African Americans who are very open-minded, who want to learn more about the African continent. They want to learn more about the people of Africa. So, we cannot forget those African Americans who are willing to learn, who are willing to be taught, who are willing to listen. And those are the African Americans that need to be speaking out more when it comes to the continent of Africa. They're the ones that need to be more vocal and sharing that, yes, it is okay to say good things about the continent of Africa. It doesn't make me less of an African American. It doesn't mean that I don't like being an African American. It doesn't mean that I look down on the Black community. It doesn't mean any of that. What it means is that even the Black community can learn something. Even African Americans can learn something. Even African Americans can say, the way we have thought for so many years is wrong, and you have to change that. And there are some African Americans, they don't want to hear that they're wrong when it comes to anything, especially when it comes to the continent of Africa. Because there's some that still feel very negatively about the continent based on what they have seen and based on what they've heard, based on the nonsense that people have fed them. And instead of them really opening their minds that, it might not be that way. If you actually talk to an actual person from the continent of Africa, that's what the word all stems from, actually talking with somebody. And I'm not talking about these little sad, experimental type of dialogue they have on social media on some of these channels, where they so-called get Africans and you know, African American people in for a conversation, because a lot of times the people that they get onto these shows and onto those platforms are not people that are going to have an engaging conversation and really come to a deep understanding. When I watch some of these things they have on YouTube, and they bring these different groups of people together, there's really not a very productive dialogue, because they don't have the right people together. They don't have people together that actually is going to make that the change is actually going to take place. They want to put people together where the division can continue to go further and further and further. You know, the conversation needs to be trying to understand each other, trying to understand why there is a division, what can be done to build it, what can be done to bring it together. And all it is a lot of misunderstanding between the two, and not knowing the history of one another. And when you don't know the history of one another, then you start to create your own. People can create that history for you. And then there you go with a made up history, hating a group of people that you didn't even really need to be hating. Now, I do like the fact that this commenter said that Africans don't hate African Americans, and that's true. Most Africans do not hate African Americans. They're not sitting around there hating on African Americans. And if you do talk to some that dislike African Americans, just like if you talk to some African Americans that dislike African people, it is due to them having a bad experience with one or two. That's it. They haven't had no bad experience with a whole group of people from an African country. And it's usually one or two people, usually from one country in Africa, that they had a problem with. So it's like they can't even differentiate the fact that they had a problem with somebody that could have been from Nigeria, or somebody that could have been from Ghana, could be from Rwanda. And then they say, okay, well, that was just these countries that I have a problem with. That has nothing to do with all the countries. And even if you did have a problem with those two people from Ghana or wherever, there's quite a few people in Ghana. So there's going to be some people in Ghana that you're not going to have a problem with. And that the same with people talking to African Americans. You know, you have to remember that not all African Americans are like that. There are some African Americans who are very nice to people from the African countries, who want to have a relationship with them, who want to learn from them. And if you meet a couple of them that ain't, you know, that just happen to be that way, just to know that they're not all that way. You know, we're not all that way. And I think that's what needs to be happening in both communities. Stop looking at each other as a collective and start looking at it as individual people, individual situations. And it's just that individual. Because when we think about outsiders, that's how we look at them. They're individuals. If that's the case, then we shouldn't have any type of relationship with anybody that's outside of us. Because everybody has done each other wrong at one point in time, when you think about it. And when it comes to Black people, the outsiders definitely have had their share of hostility towards the Black community, and you're still dealing with those people. You haven't wrote them off at all. So the same, that's because you see them as individuals. It was just this person that did it. It was just this restaurant that did it. It was just this business that did it. And then you move on to the next one. But you don't do that. We don't do that with each other. We look at each other like the colonizers look at us. And we put everybody in a collective bowl. It's just that simple. All right, you all. That is all I have to say on these two comments. Thank you for watching today on Let's Chat Saturday. I am Michelle Mazelleغ. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.